Hey everybody, Scott Roberts here from Explore Scientific. I've been chatting with you online and stuff. I just wanted to show you that video. That was from the European Space, ESO, and those guys put together. I mean, it's an incredible visualization. I'm sure pretty accurate is based off of what we know about the universe and everything. It starts in Europe and of course keeps going out and going out and going out to where it's just just a speck out there. It's good for perspective because that's what astronomy does. Is it helps you reframe your reality. It helps you reframe how you think about your life and the reason why we're here. And it makes you ask the big questions internally. All of us do that. And, we are we're the only animal on the planet that that has built tools that we know of anyways, has built tools to go and observe the skies. And so, my first tool that I had, this is, let me see if I can get it in the camera here. It is that big, is my first telescope. This was a 40 millimeter airspace doublet. It was made for Kmart. It was under the Focal brand. And this is actually really from 1970. Still has the tag on it and everything. I'll show you some of the features of it. Yeah, it's not even a Tasco. I know. Tascos were more money back then. This is a focal refractor. You can see it's on a pretty flimsy table tripod mount, just alt azimuth. Okay. It had a finder scope that really is just a tube. There wasn't even any optics in here. And it has just a metal bracket that's held on. So there is no adjustment for it. Okay. When I got this telescope in 1970, the astronauts had already landed on the moon. This was my Christmas gift. And I was, definitely all about wanting a telescope. I'd wanted one for a couple of years, had begged and hounded my parents for it. This telescope cost about $15. This is not the original one, but it is. This telescope is from that era. I have the gift box for it. It was wrapped in a newspaper from 1970, so it is from that year. It had never been used, and the plastic parts on it are still perfect. It's in mint condition, and I'm glad I was able to get it. I found it on eBay for $35, and I bid $150 for it. So yeah, it was cool. It was cool to find it. I talked to my father, who bought it for me, and he was working at LTV in Grand Prairie, Texas, where I guess recently they've had a big plastics fire or something. But LTV back in the 60s was making parts for aerospace, including the Apollo mission. So that was kind of cool that my stepfather was involved in a company where they made parts for Apollo. And my views through the moon with this, left a searing impression on me. It was very hard to use though. You had to put it on a table. You had to put your head down. You had to look through the eyepiece straight through it. And and by all accounts, this is only a 40 millimeter objective, and a lot of amateur astronomers out there, would say, "Oh gosh, couldn't your parents have bought you a?" Looks like we are off the air. Do you guys see that I'm off the air? You still see me? Okay, that's strange. All right. Anyways, we'll keep going. Anyhow, but this is the telescope that got me started, and I've had a lifelong interest in astronomy and space exploration, and I'm 61 now, and I'm still at it. So anyhow, that was that one. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little video that I did. It's a couple of years old, and it compares two very small telescopes. These are 50 millimeter refractors, and looking at it from someone that has built telescopes for a while and had worked with telescope designs for a while. And so these are things that, pointers that people should look for, if they're getting their grandkid a small telescope or something, to see if they're going to be interested in it and go into it like one of us did. So here we go. So what if you want to get your young child or your grandchild interested in astronomy, exploring the night sky, but you can't even spend $100? Maybe that budget's less than $80 or $70. So what can you do? Now, one of the things, the essential tool for a lot of beginner amateur astronomers and also for experienced amateur astronomers is to have a pair of binoculars. Binoculars are great because they're low power, wide field. They produce bright images. They can reveal nebula and they can reveal galaxies. But if you're hand-holding binoculars, about the highest magnification you want to hand-hold is maybe, if you got real steady hands, maybe about 12 power. These are 10 by 50 binoculars, so eyepieces that result in 10 magnification with 50 millimeter objectives. And this produces a pretty bright image, 5 millimeter exit pupil, which is great for deep sky observing, good for looking at comets and a number of things. So it is a very useful tool, but you do have to hand hold binoculars unless you buy some sort of tripod platform for it. Parallelogram platform are also sold for binoculars and nice to use. But if you're a grandparent or if you're a parent and you're on a limited budget, you have to carefully choose the kind of product that might keep your young child interested in astronomy and keep them exploring. As for myself, my personal telescope when I was young, at 10 years old, I had a 40 millimeter refractor. It was on a very wobbly mount, but that telescope gave me views of the moon that still stick with me today. And I still have not the original telescope that I had when I was a kid, because I pretty much had destroyed it by taking it apart, but I found it again, and I purchased that telescope again because there's so many great memories about that telescope. And if I had not had a small telescope, an inexpensive telescope, and at the time when I was 10 getting this, I think my parents could only afford $15 for this gift, and that was a burden for them at the time. But if I had not had that small telescope, even with wobbly tripod, even with poor optics, really what most amateur astronomers would call a trash telescope, I wouldn't have gotten into the hobby the way that I have. I probably wouldn't own this telescope company, Explore Scientific. So I'm grateful for that small telescope. And and I know that many of my friends are involved in astronomy because they had that first spark with a small telescope. And so let's look more closely at what small telescopes can be and what might be what we would consider to be a poor quality telescope today versus something that's decent that sells for about the same price. You can get good quality if you choose wisely. So let's talk about the heart of any telescope. And the heart of any telescope, of course, is the optics themselves, the objective lens that is gathering the light to bring that light to focus. And telescopes that were developed during the time of Galileo used a technique of just using a single lens. And this, in fact, is very much like Galileo's telescope. I'm going to take this lens hood off. And we're going to disassemble it so you can actually see how this telescope is made. Because the objective lenses during Galileo's time were not of very good quality, the way that they made the image sharper was by putting a field stop right behind the lens. And this one has, in fact, a 50 millimeter lens here, but it's got a stop down ring right behind it that takes it down to 32 millimeters. So one of the misleading parts of this telescope is that it is in fact a 32 millimeter refractor instead of a 50 millimeter refractor. And so it's a 600 millimeter focal length. Stopping it down doesn't change the focal length, but it does change the F ratio. This is almost like around an F18 telescope right now, and it's advertised as an F12. It's advertised as a 50 millimeter objective, 600 millimeter focal length telescope. So that is a little bit misleading regarding a telescope such as this. The other thing to look at is the accessories that come with the telescope. In this case, we have a 0.965 inch Huygens eyepiece, a 0.965 inch diagonal mirror, and a 0.965 inch size focuser. The finder itself just uses a single lens up here. This is behind here is literally like a peephole with a single lens. And so this is made like a Galilean telescope. But if you look closely at the bracket that holds this, there's no real adjustments to align this little telescope, the finder scope, with the main telescope. And so pointing it is going to be pretty difficult to do. Huygens eyepieces are not known for a lot of eye comfort. They will produce a sharp image, of course, and this particular one is like a 20 millimeter eyepiece, and so it's going to produce about 30 magnification. 600 millimeter focal length divided by 20 is going to give you 30 magnification. But the apparent field of such an eyepiece is around 30 degrees apparent field, so it's going to look like looking down a thin pipe into the sky. The next thing to look at is the mount itself, and this is what's called an alt-azimuth mount. This particular mount does have a handle for adjusting it, which makes it easier to hold the telescope and to point it. So azimuth is this side-to-side movement, and altitude, or alt, is this up and down movement, kind of like tilt and pan on a telescope. But you can see even when I'm just adjusting it here, it is not very sturdy, and part of the reason is that in order to reduce costs, they have chosen to use plastic for the mount parts here. And so that does reduce the pointing ability and makes it a little bit more frustrating to use when you have something like that. The other problem I'm seeing here too is that if you're pointing the telescope and you have the handle over one of the leg supports here, you can't point it very high. You do have to clear that, and then you can point it up at the sky. So now we're going to take a look at the tripod legs. This is the supporting structure to the mount, and in small department store telescopes, typically what you're going to see are very thin legs because they can't use a lot of material typically to because it raises the cost of the instrument. But if you're looking for something that's under $60, this is typically what you're going to see. That is not very stable. The parts being plastic, thin wall aluminum, make so that the mount does have a lot of flexure. It does have a lot of vibration. Frankly, these are the kind of things that drive amateur astronomers nuts. Once we have gone through an inexpensive telescope and we go to our better telescopes, we really enjoy the stability of them, the light gathering ability of them, the better eyepieces, the better everything. And so we always feel that it's better to spend, better to save up a few $100s and buy something better. But what if you can't save up a few $100s? Let's say that you want to get your child interested in astronomy at a young age and you got to spend $60 or less. Well, there are options, and you just have to be careful when you shop, and you need to ask the right questions about the telescope that you want to buy. So here we are again with another 50 millimeter telescope, and we'll just take off the lens hood like we did before, and you can see this is a clear aperture 50 millimeter objective lens. But I'm going to take it apart here so you can see how this is constructed, because it's an airspace doublet, and you want a doublet lens because you can get better image correction, and you're not relying on a field stop, which limits the aperture to correct out the distortion on the edges. So let's talk about the objective lenses on both of these telescopes. You can see that we've got this field stop behind a single lens. Okay, and this is very much how Galileo did it, except the hole that he had was much smaller on his lenses. He had, I think, maybe his first telescope was like a 26mm objective lens, but the field stop behind there took it down to maybe around a centimeter or something, because he was trying to get rid of aberrations towards the edges. When you take a magnifying glass, just a single magnifying glass, and you shine light through it, sunlight, you'll see that the rays of light will actually split up into different colors. And that's what's called chromatic aberration. And it's because the center of this lens is actually thicker than the edges of the lens. But that's how the light gets bent through the lens, because it's thicker in the center, thinner at the edges. It bends down to a focus, and that's how you get an objective lens to focus on a telescope. This lens, actually it's two lenses. One is the lens that's doing the job of gathering the light and bringing it down to a focus. It is thicker in the center, thinner towards the edges. But then we use this lens right here, and it's actually flat on this side and concave here. So this convex lens fits right into that concave hollow. And what it does is it evens out the edges here. Now the thicknesses are the same from the edge to the center to the edge. And we get rid of a lot of the chromatic aberration. That's where the light separates into different colors. But there's also this thing, and it's a spacer between the lenses, and so that gives air spacing between the two lens elements and allows this double system called a doublet, and it's an air space doublet. It gives it better color correction than it might have otherwise. So full aperture, 50mm, this is going to gather 244% more light than this system. And light gathering is what it's all about, because the more light you gather, the further into space you can see, the more detail you can see in nebula, the more detail you can see in a galaxy or faint stars. And so with a 50mm objective versus using a 32mm objective, you can see a broad range of celestial objects. When I compare these two telescopes side by side, what I notice is that the tube assembly, the actual tube assembly of the telescope on the right is made out of plastic. And because it's made out of plastic, you can see if there's light kind of reflecting off the sides. It is black plastic, but light reflecting off the sides reduces contrast. And you can see the other unit as I sweep across here. This is a metal tube that's painted flat black on the inside. And this is going to keep stray light down and make images of like the moon, for example, very contrasty. It makes for a darker sky, and that helps deep sky objects pop out a little bit better. So when you see the Orion Nebula through this instrument, it's actually going to look better. Not only is more light going to get into this instrument because of the larger objective, the stars will be pinpointed to the edges. It'll have a nice contrasty look to it, which always helps when you're doing observing. We've talked a lot about the objective lenses and the differences between a singlet lens with a field stop behind it and those disadvantages, although that was really the first way that telescopes, refracting telescopes were improved. Having the doublet airspace system really does make a much better system. And later, if someone actually really gets a deep interest in astronomy, they can move up to something called an ED apochromatic refractor. And those can be 2-element, 3-element, and 4-element systems. But I think that the other side of the telescope, which is the eyepiece side, is super important. You can take a really mediocre telescope, and just by putting much better eyepieces on it, you can get a much better, much more comfortable view. These are two eyepieces here. This is a 25mm, what's called a colossal design, because a guy named Plossel designed it way back when. And this is a Huygens eyepiece, one of the first eyepieces ever designed. The diameter of this eyepiece is a 0.965 inch standard. This is a 1.25 inch standard. This is what's used on premium telescopes a lot of times. This eyepiece all by itself can sell for about $40 to $50. So a great advantage in this particular telescope that is selling for under 60 bucks. And it comes with two of these Plossel eyepieces. One is a 25, which is going to give nice low powers for deep sky observing. Low power viewing actually lets you see further away because you get a brighter image to your eye. But bright objects like the moon, planets, those kinds of things, where you'd like to use some magnification, we have a 9.7 millimeter eyepiece. So Plossel eyepieces have wider apparent field, which makes it look like you're looking not down a thin tube, but through a wider port. And it also gives you more eye comfort. Your eye is not squeezed all the way up to the lenses to get that field of view. You can be further back, more comfortable. And eye comfort is what it's all about. Eye comfort also makes it a lot easier for a young person who's using their telescope for the first time to get a nice, good view through a telescope. Now let's take a careful look at the finder scopes on both of these telescopes. Here we have the small aperture optical finder. This telescope finder has no adjustments up and down or side to side. So in order to get the parallax, the parallax is the adjustment so that this tube is seeing the same thing that this tube is seeing. And so in order to do that, we just physically have to move it and twist it and bend it until we get something that looks pretty close, so that when I look through the finder here and I point the telescope, I will see the object of my target in the center here in the center of the eyepiece. And what we have here is something called a red dot finder. The red dot finder actually illuminates a projection of a red dot against a clear lens, and you can keep both eyes open, and what you'll see behind the finder scope itself is the background stars. It makes it infinitely easier to point because you're not peering through a small lens. Also, you'll see on the side there is adjustments, so we can adjust the side-to-side position of this red dot, and there's also another adjustment down here in the back. Excuse me, I was thinking it was in the front, but this will adjust the up and down motion, so we can get this aligned with our eyepiece very, very quickly, very easily, and this allows us to point the telescope very easily. You'll also notice too that the finder has a little peephole here so that we can initially sight it to start the calibration work here, and what it ends up being is just a much easier, much better way to find stars in the sky. And finally, we're taking a good look at the tripod here. This is an all-metal tripod, and it has this accessory tray that can hold the eyepieces. Because it is a solid tube, this is a stronger tripod than the aluminum channel type. And we get up to the mount itself, and we can see that we have the same kind of alt-as adjustment, but now instead of plastic, this is metal, and so we have much less vibration with the telescope, and we have much better range of movement with the longer handle adjustment. To lock it in position, all we got to do is give it a twist, and it stays. And so it's just overall a better, stiffer, smoother, less vibration type of system out there. Again, for about the same price. So all these nice features, the inch and a quarter eyepieces, the red dot finder, the metal tube with the flat black paint inside, the metal tripod mount, the alt-azimuth metal head there, much stiffer, much less vibration. The airspace doublet lens in this National Geographic 50 millimeter refractor really do make it a fantastic value. You'll find that National Geographic typically only allows their brand to be put on better product, and I don't think that I'd want to sell anything less quality than something like this, because we really do want to spark the interest of youngsters out there. We do want to give great value for what parents and grandparents can get for their kids. And, so for all of that, you're getting an amazing deal. But I do have to be honest, even the other telescopes that I've been showing are better than Galileo's own telescopes. But we've come a long way, and it's time to step up the quality. And so where are you going to find this kind of product? You're going to find it in department stores. You're going to find it online. So, we hope this dispels some of the misnomers about department store telescopes.
with all of that, I think, pretty easily.
Hey, everybody.
What kind of telescope would be? Give me an idea on the aperture.
Gentlemen, we are all on the air right now.
Oh,
Yep.
Yeah.
I told everyone I was trying something new, but right
yeah.
now I wanted to kind of introduce, focus on Matthias Schmidt. Matthias and I met, it's been 2 years ago, something like that, 3 years ago, maybe.
Yes.
Yes, and Matthias was one of the, or maybe the executive producer of Space Racers, which was animated and still is an animated television series for young children to learn about the concepts of space exploration, and a very, very cool little program. My grandchildren watched it. Heck, I started watching it, so it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. But Matthias has, you've changed your career, and you decided to follow your dreams to be closer to those dark skies, and to explore the night sky and to help others. Most importantly, to help others explore the night skies. You're in Utah right now, is that right?
That's right. I'm the town is Cedar City, Utah. It's southwest Utah.
Mm-hmm.
The next largest city is St. George.
Okay.
It's 3 hours north of Las Vegas and 4 hours south of Salt Lake City. And Cedar City has a national park that is close by. It's called Cedar Breaks National Monument, which is an international dark sky location. And bearing any snafus, you never know with government background checks what they could dig up on me, even though I've been here for 24 years and I've gotten maybe a speeding ticket at most in that time. Actually, it was at the Oklahoma Star Party where I got pulled over by a state trooper.
Oh, no.
Because I was speeding, and he asked me where I'm coming from and what I'm doing here, because I had a rental, and I told him about the Star Party and how wonderful it is. And except this year, it was all cloudy.
Right.
And he only gave me a warning. So obviously, the other thing is he had the same birthday.
Oh, there you go.
Strange things happen in Oklahoma. And
not work for me one time. I did actually get pulled over, and he looks at my driver's license and says, June 8th, huh? He goes, that's my birthday. And I said, yeah. I said, wow. I said, happy birthday. And he said, where? We were in the same town I graduated from. I said, where did you graduate from? And he said, Oceanside High. And I graduated from Oceanside High. And I thought he was going to let me off. Okay. And he says, well, that's great. He says, your birthday is in a couple of days. He said, he writes out a ticket. He says, happy birthday.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, don't speed. Don't speed.
Yeah. I don't remember what I did. Maybe I ran a stoplight. Who knows? So maybe I was contemplating the universe at that time, which I shouldn't have done. So anyhow, I deserved the ticket.
Yeah.
But Cedar Breaks, just how dark is it there?
I got here last Friday, and the first night, of course, I went out to the park, and I took my Unihedron sky pollution measurement device.
Oh, okay, you got one. All right.
I wanted to have something that is of good quality, and it can provide consistent data. Yeah. So I actually took a measurement, and it came out to 21.64, which is 2 on the Bortle scale. And it was, I think, about 10 o'clock at night. There is some light pollution from the city that's close by, from Cedar City, which is about 25 miles away, but it's more of a glow and it's low level. The park is at 10,000 feet, so it is.
Oh, that's high.
It's an excellent location. So
super transparent skies.
Yeah, super... and this image here is an image that I took with my camera at that location, and I'm planning on putting up a measurement station that will be able to measure consistently, regularly, and have reliable data to share with others about the effects of light pollution And it's a 12-month program that I'll be doing here. And there is no. It's a wonderful community. The skies are dark and clear, and the park also hosts the Southwest Astronomy Festival, which isn't happening this year but next year. So there'll be lots of things to do in the meantime. There is educational outreach. There'll be some stargazing parties. We'll work with Brian Head with the resort as well. So
fantastic.
It's a great place, and I have to admit, I lived in New York City for 15 years.
Yeah,
and I've been a member of the Amateur Astronomy Association of New York, and we have a dark site that we go to north of the city, 2 hours. But when I used to go to Central Park, I can make out the brightest stars and the constellations relatively easily.
Right.
Orion is wonderful in the spring, even from Central Park, and I admit that it's gotten somewhat difficult to make out the constellations here.
Oh yeah, it's always
because there are so many stars, and I'm comparing. I'm looking at my star chart, and I'm looking up at the sky, and I'm trying to figure out where the stars are that belong to which constellations they are, and they're kind of a transition. They flow over. So because my intention is to connect people with the stories about the constellations and point out the obvious constellations. So I want to be well prepared for this activity. But it's not going to be that easy, which has a lot of benefits, right? Because you can point out other objects like nebula and galaxies, and I saw Ptolemy's cluster just the other night. It's to me, I work with Stellarium, which is a free software.
Yeah.
I'm relatively new to the astronomy amateur observing community. And I admit that sometimes when, especially the last few days, I've been looking up at the sky and there are some white patches and smudges, and I'm thinking, okay, that's not a star. What is it?
Yeah.
So I have to consult the star charts and the apps that I use to figure out what they are.
Yeah.
So it will be a wonderful challenge. It will be a wonderful challenge.
A couple of galaxies. Yes, that's right. Wow.
Yeah, that's something that that's a good problem to have, really.
Right.
Yes.
You can't get frustrated looking at the sky trying to figure out where you're looking at. That's got to be a great. That's a new learning experience. I experienced dark skies like that for the first time a few years ago, with the Milky Way, and it's just like you said. You look up and you say, "Where are the constellations at? They're no longer there. Everything else is there."
Yeah.
Yes.
Milky
Yes.
is there. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, and it's there all year round. Even the winter Milky Way is still intense looking. So that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you'll find that out here pretty soon. So when is this Southwest Star Party happening?
It's in September every year, but it's canceled this year because of the pandemic.
Sure.
But next year it will be happening.
That will be, yeah. It's planned. It's planned, anyways.
To have a astronomy, the Southwest Astronomy Festival next year.
And what other kind of facilities do they have? What if someone was to go to the Star Party? They have bathrooms, a meeting area, showers.
So there is a visitor office, and bathrooms are there as well. As part of my new position, I am one of my many tasks is to manage the inventory of telescopes that's available at the park.
Okay.
So I don't know yet how many and what telescopes they have, but I was told that there's plenty available for the star parties.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's
once, yeah.
hopefully we can be out there with you and participate in that star party. I love going to places such as this. I love Utah. Been there many times for stargazing, and I also love the national park system and the national monument system. It is a great heritage that we have in this country, and if you live here, it's just amazing that we have such places, the Grand Canyon, Cedar Breaks, all the Arches National Monument. I mean, it's just a long list of them.
Yeah.
And they need to be protected. We need to protect our dark sky heritage. You have a dream job right now in being able to participate in that. So I'm sure you're going to learn quite a bit, in running these programs, and actually professionally protecting dark skies is a cool deal, so.
Yes.
I think that's awesome.
Dark sky protector.
Yes, that's right. Do you get a special badge or?
Next Marvel Comics film, Dark Sky Protector.
And get a cape and a mask.
Stars on it and stuff,
Red light. Got to be red light.
Oh yeah.
Gotta be.
Of course, right.
You had to create that cartoon character. You had to create that.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming on our show today and talking about this. I plan to ask you to come on to our virtual star party. We have virtual star party 4 coming up next Tuesday. Not sure if you can make that one, but if you are, just let me know. You got my phone number, man. So.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thanks for dropping in. The next thing we're going to will be, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. Now, I started off this program talking about small telescopes, and I showed my first telescope, which is a 40 millimeter focal refractor. It had like this push-pull zoom lens, so it didn't even have a diagonal, and it had a peephole, not even optical, a peephole finder scope on this non-adjustable finder bracket, okay? By all accounts, and on a wobbly tabletop tripod, very difficult to use telescope, but it ignited, a lifelong passion for space exploration, astronomy, science, and so, I've always gravitated towards that. So I'm glad I was able to show that and get some great comments from you guys on some of your first telescopes and that type of thing. I also always look for resources that's on the internet that's free to people who do educational outreach. And a lot of you may be doing homeschooling, or you might be your kids or grandkids may be at home, learning from home. And so I found this really cool kit from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and it is about it's to make a moon phase calculator. And so I'm going to build this one later, but it's got a very cool dial on it that has all the months and the days on it. It has it has phases of the moon in there, and it shows you how to construct all of this. So
that's nice.
It's kind of complex, actually.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
From a bunch of rocket scientists at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So they were the ones that designed this, and so the link is on our posting here. So I think you'll like that. We have been talking with James, the astrophotographer, and I think he got inspired by the Virtual Star Party 3. Cesar Brolo was talking about how people bring in their Newtonians to do, and want to turn them into astrographs. Okay, now this is a First Light series 130 millimeter Newtonian telescope, just a standard Newtonian, 1.25 inch rack and pinion focuser, Very lightweight. I think it weighs 7 pounds, something like that. Very lightweight. We're going to let him borrow one because he wanted to try doing some astrophotography through it and, checking out just how good it could be for, during the Virtual Star Party 4, which is coming up next Tuesday. And it will also be, once again, on the Clear Skies network. So, you can expect to see Dustin Gibson there. But we also have our special guest, Kelly Beatty from Sky and Telescope Magazine, and of course David Levy, who's always on our star parties. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and so I think that you might enjoy that, Matthias.
Yeah. And
to talk about dark skies and maybe give a presentation on what Cedar Breaks has to offer to amateur astronomers. At this point, I did want to turn to the other topics in our show today, and what were those topics? We had
talk a little bit about the PMC-8 and the development of it, the history,
right.
A little bit of
Let's
the history.
That, Jerry.
Okay.
All right.
Let me see here. I've got some pictures to show, early pictures of the development. Let me share my screen. And I'll just give you guys a quick look at my desktop while we're at it here, so you can see what I've got on my desktop, along with all the buttons up and top and bottom. I know people always like to comment about all the stuff I have going on.
Yeah.
All right. There's nothing to show here. That's real good.
Nothing here, folks. Keep moving.
I don't know what happened to that picture. You can see they're here. All right, so, excuse me. This is an early version of the PMC-8. In fact, this is the first version that I developed back in 2013. I can't get the Zoom thing to come up. What is it taking so long? I don't know why my machine all of a sudden decides to stop working.
You wanted to do something.
So this was actually designed, the first iteration when we first started, we were going to put this in the Exos 2, and it was going to be internal to the motor, to the RA motor housing. That's why it's this small. And I can't zoom. I don't know why it won't let me zoom up on it. Stupid thing.
You have 17 programs open, Jerry. That's
yeah. Typically, I don't have a problem. You're right. It's a lot of stuff. So this is how small it was, and this was just the initial design that I brought to Scott and showed him initially. And the next thing I want to show is, okay, so this is even before that. This is when I was breadboarding everything. And so you see, I've got this processor board. This is this big board right here that's got the processor, the PMC-8 processor, and then it's got a breadboard where I could wire all the peripherals up to that microcontroller. It's a propeller, it's parallax propeller microcontroller. So I could wire up the serial port, and I could wire up the motor controller, driver chips, and all that stuff, and get it to work. And then I've got my little oscilloscope up here to watch the signals, and it's kind of cool. I spent about a month doing this initial prototyping. I did create a document to show Scott.
Yeah.
When I first started this, and this is what it looked like. Explore Scientific Motion Controller Project, and we didn't even have a name for it yet. I don't believe.
No.
And I talk about the technology. This is like the proposal that I presented to Scott in 2013. It was July 13th, 2013.
My sister's birthday.
Oh, really? And so I outlined what the models would be, what the features might be for each of the models. I was looking pretty far ahead even back then, in terms of what kind of features we would want on the different models. And today we've got the Model 2A, which is decidedly a base model. It's not a more advanced model. It's a base model. Then the Model 1 is the other base model, which is in the today in the iExos 100. It's got the Model 1A. It's the Model 1A. The Model 2 was developed first for the G11 and the Exos 2 mounts. And so I talk about, this is my anal retentive stuff with the nuclear documentation. And this is something that I wanted to talk about a little bit. We mentioned it earlier, Scott.
Yeah.
How much I spend trying to do the documentation on our products and the process we go through, the development process that I've worked on and introduced to our business, Explore Scientific. But and Scott can talk more about what it was like at Meade in terms of development. I'm sure you had some engineers there that did a lot of this type of work, but I don't know. I didn't have a feeling, since we're such a small company, you don't really have a lot of resources to do this kind of work.
No. Well, we had more resources to do this kind of work at Meade than we do here, but it was kind of hit or miss as far as documentation went. They did not have. They had fits and starts where they would do documentation. To create a document control system and all of these things, because we certainly had aerospace engineers coming in to work at Meade Instruments that were trained in Six Sigma and all of this stuff, but it wasn't. I don't think it was taken as seriously as it should have been, and so I learned a term when I worked there called tribal knowledge. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Tribal knowledge. And I said, "What's tribal knowledge?" And they said, "Well, tribal knowledge, the knowledge that disappears when somebody gets fired or quits their job, And I go,
"That's right.
That."
Right. That's right.
So, having documentation is very, very important when you're developing anything. It's also very important when you're doing your astronomy too. You look at someone like David Levy, and he kept these diaries. His writings. He would draw pictures. He that kind of thing. And all of those writings are now at the Linda Hall Library. They're there with manuscripts from Herschel and other great astronomers, So really happy he was able to, devote or to donate those to Linda Hall. It's very cool.
Here's another image.
Which model is this one?
It's a 2A04J, which is an early prototype from 2013. And again, it's the next. So I have to confess, the first. I think the first two prototypes that I had made did not work. They worked. Most of the circuitry worked, but there was a very critical feature that did not work. The first one was I had misconfigured the circuit on the communications port. So even though it would power up and everything looked like it was okay, the serial port did not work. I could not communicate with the microprocessor. So that was the first prototype that I screwed up. The second one had an issue with the motor driver chips. I don't know if you remember that, Scott, but there was some information in the data sheet for the motor driver chips, which are Texas Instrument stepper motor drivers, that I'd basically gone through and overlooked it, overlooked a specific bypass capacitor that needed to be on the chip to even make it function. And it wasn't clear in the documentation how critical that was. So that's why I kind of went over my head. And I have to say again, this was the first time I tried to develop a system like this. And actually, I was brand new to the development environment, the CAD program that we use, which is called DipTrace. It's the circuit design system that I use. I was new to that, so I was learning all this time during 2013. I was learning all this stuff, and that was actually before I was hired as an employee for Explore Scientific. I was working as a contractor at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
So here's another early. This is another early prototype where we had it installed in a box, in the aluminum box, the first concept of the aluminum box that we had.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? It was you liked that look because it was like the Apple product look, you know.
Kind of minimalistic looking.
Right. And at that time,
the insides don't look very minimalistic though.
No. So I'd started out with this simple design, and we had to wire it up because it was just a prototype. I hadn't gotten to the point where I decided we needed to make the board bigger to put all the connectors on it, and not have any wires at all. You know, those are failure points.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of those wires is a failure point. So we got rid of all that.
What do you think, Matthias? Are we lifting the hood up enough, or are we being transparent enough with our community?
That's amazing. You know, I believe in progress.
Yeah.
And you start out with something simple, you put it into action, and I like tinkering. And this looks like a great. I know how I have I have the mount, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And it works like a charm, right? It works like a charm. So I have appreciation for seeing just a few pictures of the progress of the controller.
We had our failures, you know, that as we're going.
Oh yeah.
Literally, this was a clean slate. We didn't take like a Celestron product or a Mead product, you know, and start tearing it apart and reverse engineering it. Okay, Jerry just starts out cold. Okay,
right. That one picture you saw, right?
Studying how it should be done, and you know, so. And there was a lot of philosophical talks that went into this, you know, many hours of philosophical talks about what the product should be, how it should last, you know, how long it should last, how the community should drive the features and the progress of it, you know. And you know, these are all dreams that we had. And, you know, I was very thankful that Jerry was on board with all this, you know. Now, we had failures, you know, when you design something up and then you send it out and say, okay, let's have a professional board manufacturing company, especially in the United States, build 5 of them for us, okay, to production quality. One thing goes wrong, man. It just doesn't work, you know, and you have to go start back all over and find out what the problem is and make more, you know. So you have a couple of rounds of that, you know. It's you're burning lots of cash getting there. So it's
yeah. It took the third time was a charm basically for the prototype, but I got something that could work. Right. From the, you know, we had to wait like 2 weeks, 3 weeks for the prototypes to come back too. So it's almost like in the old days when you used to take pictures of the sky and develop film.
Yeah.
You sent it off. Sent it off.
Sent it off to Rochester to get developed, right?
Yeah. Then you got it back and you saw, oh man, I screwed that up.
Right.
I can't.
It's a great case study for systems engineering.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's basically it. Start from scratch. You don't have very much opportunities in this world to start a brand new project from scratch as an individual engineer. You know, this is basically a one-person job.
Yeah.
And I, you know, from soup to nuts, all the way from the hardware, nuts and bolts, all the way through the firmware and the software, I've got to work on every bit of it, which is a great opportunity.
Yes.
Let me see here. Oh, here's a drawing, a CAD. This is the CAD program I use, a dip trace. This is what that board looked like when I rendered it in 3D rendering, for example. Let's see here. So in terms of documentation, what I've done, I progressed, you know, once we got to the product to where we were getting ready to release it. and I had worked on the firmware for 2 or 3 years, probably. Well, I started development in the middle of 2013 as a contractor, just with concepts.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we went about a year to a year and a half just iterating through different concepts on what the packaging, how big the board would be, what the features would be. So once we nailed that down, I would say by the end of 2014 to 2015. In fact, I've got a timeline here. If I could bring it up. Where's my? I had my PowerPoint up. I don't see it. Anyway, in 2014 is when I started on the final design iteration for the board for the G11 and the Exos 2. That's what it was. I had just we went through a year of testing on that and prototyping to get the firmware up to speed. The 2015, and I'd been working on the programmer's reference manual to document everything about the device. This is how many pages is this? This is says it's more than 22 pages. It's 60 some pages. I don't think I've got an early version of this
Go
thing.
through each page and talk.
Let me see. I don't know if this is. Oh, this is an early version. This is an early version of the programmer's reference. So
yeah,
I've got to find the other one. This is from February of 2018. Let me see.
You updated this so far?
That's what I'm gonna. I think about 5 times.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring up the latest one here. All right, so this is the latest one. I haven't updated it for over a year. I need to start working on it some more. So this is the let's see. I thought I had the version. How many iterations? Oh, here it is. All right. So here's the revision history. So it's been 7 releases.
But
and it's grown quite a bit.
Documentation, and it is through this documentation also that we've been able to build a community on. So with programmers taking the PMC-Eight to the next level. So.
Right, this is 59 pages now, and these are the final versions. So that's the big board. That's the version 2A model. So that little board I was showing earlier grew up into this.
Right.
Over like a 3-year period from 2013 to 2016.
Now we need to squeeze it all down to the size of my thumbnail, okay?
Right, so the next iteration was this version, which is the iXOS 100, which is back down to the same size as that original board.
Right.
And it's got practically all the same circuitry. It's packed in tighter. It's not quite as robust in terms of reliability because we added a lot of features to this larger board that increases the reliability quite a bit. And I don't know that we've really had any failures of this board. You think that's the case?
I don't think so. I don't think so. We have found, individual things that with like power supply failures, stuff like that. It'll be interesting. I'm going to get the customer service records. We'll pull those out and go through those on a show, just so that people understand, what the reliability of that system is. It really is. I mean, I didn't want to see these things come back, for any reason. I'm not interested in having customers that are having anxiety over a broken piece of equipment, when, there is a learning curve, of course, with all this stuff, but, the tools that we have today where, heck, one of our tech reps can jump online with you, get into, to your computer, see how your configuration is set up and everything, all remotely.
Right.
We did this
right.
with Gary Palmer just before we ran a show one time. He was in the UK, and we were able to see what the problem was and get it fixed. I think
Right.
it is firmware too, remotely.
Yep.
So that was really
Yep.
cool.
So one thing I wanted to point out here is this is the current shipping model, and I guess it's okay to say that we've actually, by the end of this year, we're going to be shipping the next version of this board to customers. But this has been the design since 2015.
Yeah.
Is when I finalized that design.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, all the work was focused on the firmware and getting it up to speed, and part of that was to develop the command language for the ASCOM driver. That was a later part in the firmware that I developed. Here's the version of the here's the IXS 100 board, just to show you real quick. This is the back side of it.
This is a good time to ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
Wade Prunty would like to know, I have the IXS 100 without this box. What does this box give you?
All right, so the big difference between these two boards is the thermal reliability and the overall design margin that's built into this large board with the big aluminum thermal heatsink that's connected to this board. The traces on this board are much bigger. They're lower resistance between all the components. It increases the reliability of the circuitry. I had to make it smaller on the IXS 100 board here. I got to get my dogs to stop barking.
The box is a professional model. It's a professional precision motion controller. Okay.
Right. That's right.
So it is intended to withstand the extremes of the environment. If you're going to build an observatory, if you live out in super hot environment, super cold environment, these kinds of things, we wanted to have a system that was not going to fail on you. And so that's I wanted something that was stronger, beefier, faster, stronger than
that's right.
anything that our competition had ever built for GOTO. And
that's right.
That's what this is. That's what this is. I would rate the IXS 100 to have all the performance of the PMC-Eight Pro box model, if that's what we want to call it.
Functionality, yeah, functionality-wise.
Functionality's there. It has it would not survive, all the nightmare situations that we would throw at the professional model. And so
right. That's right.
If you're looking at building an observatory, you need a more robust mount. You need something like that. The box is where you need to go.
Right. There's some other features that I designed into this board to be more flexible also. One of the main things was this communications interface. It's actually a separate board that plugs into the main board. It's like a daughter board that's got the Wi-Fi module on it. And that was designed so that we could build these other interface modules for if we have a new Wi-Fi module that we develop, which we actually do.
The Wi-Fi modules have been increasing in quality, capability, so we wanted to be able to follow that.
Right. And also provide maybe an alternative interface like an Ethernet port instead of a Wi-Fi port here as a plug-in. So that's the flexibility that we designed into this board. And also the connectors are the DB9, old school DB9 connectors, which are much more robust than the little RJ connectors that we have on the iAxos 100 version of the board. The other thing is that all the components are on one side of the board on this, just so that the layout is cleaner and just physically more robust compared to the iAxos 100, which has components on both sides of the board, as you can see here. So once we came about 2015 to 2016, in 2016, I was finalizing the firmware and the ASCOM driver, but we also ran into the bugaboo of we had to do the FCC testing on the board for emissions.
Right.
RF emissions and also conductive emissions through the power supply if you're plugged in. So the emissions testing took a lot longer than we expected. The board was actually ready to deliver or done practically by the middle of 2016. The spring of 2016, I was fairly comfortable with releasing it. And we didn't think the FCC testing would take that long. We thought we'd be able to release it by the middle of 2016, by the end of the summer, probably, I think, if I recall correctly. But it dragged on till the end of 2016, basically.
Right.
But it passed with flying colors. It was very robust. That was really gratifying to me that I had.
Yeah, you pretty much did that as a one and done kind of deal when you submitted it, and
right.
That was very much unlike my experiences at my former place of work. So we would do one, and then they'd say, "Oh, you need to change this, you need to do that."
Oh, really?
We'd submit another one, and then they'd go, "Okay, well, maybe you need to do that," and then we'd do it again. Of course, all those tests are they're not free. So
no, they're pretty expensive.
They're not free. So
I think that speaks to the approach I took, and I basically talked Scott into, I think, maybe early on to design this thing with a lot of robustness and a lot of margin, and it's kind of over-designed in that way to where it would be successful right out of the box.
Yeah.
And all this testing and then the reliability. That was the reliability requirement, which was Scott's #1 requirement.
Yeah.
Drove that.
Yeah, and it may be, as you said, it may be over-designed, but I had dreamed of using the PMC-8 precision motion controller even to refit old professional observatory telescopes. Which
oh yeah,
which is something actually we could do with it. So
absolutely,
we haven't had that opportunity yet, but. Hoping one day someone comes to us, maybe an old antique telescope or something, and gives us the opportunity. I think our first chance may be the 24-inch refractor, the Brashear refractor.
That would be awesome.
Arkansas, and the 1910 refractor, and in its day it was one of the world's largest refractors, and so it was, in fact, it ranked amongst one of the world's largest telescopes at the time. So, it's, but it's it's like a 30-foot long tube. It weighs many tons, and so it'd be fun to make that operate with the PMC-8 system.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That would be awesome. That would be a great honor for me. I mean, that's just even today. I just picture in my head all the customers that have this at their house.
Yeah.
And it's still, it's really nerve-wracking when you think about all these people are relying on this instrument to work,
right.
And
there's Jerry.
And I know it's like it's just all on me to make it work right and to make it work the first time. So it's just, it's a brand new experience for me.
Yeah. No, it's.
This is it.
You had that same pressure work in a nuclear power plant, though.
I guess.
If the nuclear power plant work right.
Yeah,
it could be a problem maybe for like a whole city of people.
Yeah, well, I was the thing I had on my shoulders was during the outage, I was involved with a lot of development for test equipment and special testing that I tried to minimize the amount of test time so that because it's $1 million a day when the plant's shut down.
Smokes.
So I was in charge of a test that typically took 24 hours, and I was able to develop the equipment to get it down to 8 hours and save quite a bit of money. So I was, and like I volunteered for this, I volunteered for that to do that work. You know, I like the challenge.
You like that challenge.
And I guess you could say I'm pretty confident in my skills and knowledge about how to do these things. And even if I don't know all the details, I know I can figure it out.
Yeah. Well, that's what you told me when we first met and talked about that.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know if you believe me so much, but
you seem pretty resolved.
But I sounded
okay.
I sounded confident.
I did, you know, I didn't have, I'm not very, you know, I see that in somebody's eyes. I'm not very skeptical. So, you know.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And so,
so I went on and developed the ASCOM interface and the Explore Scientific command language, which controls the whole mount, which just basically tells you how to tell the motors what to do in a very precise way. And if you look at this command language, if you were to go download the program's reference and look at the command language, it's a very small, short language in terms of the number of statements and the number of things you can do. It's a lot different than the Meade command language because it's taken all the astronomy stuff out of the box. There's nothing related to astronomy at all in the PMC-Eight. It doesn't know anything about the mount. It just thinks it's a motor system. Okay.
Right.
It's abstracted out so that all the commands that deal with astronomy are in the driver, in the ASCOM driver, or in the Explore Stars app on the host tablet that you're using. So that's how I was able to simplify the language, and it makes it easier for people to actually program to it because you don't have as many commands to understand. There's only a few real basic commands that you need to know, and it's easy to learn. So
right,
that was a big part of the ASCOM, the success of the ASCOM driver, and for me to get it done, it took me 3 months to code the ASCOM driver in the first version, and it worked pretty much out of the box at that point. I'd left off a couple of features that I had to go back and add later, but overall it worked great. The interesting thing is, just recently in the last 3 or 4 months, we found a problem with the slew command that had an error in it, and it was not identified for over 3 years. And one of our customers discovered it, and sure enough, it was something in the firmware that I had done that
we
was a
talked about that. We talked about that before on a show, but can you refresh my memory what who the person was and exactly what the?
I think it was Bill Black that discovered it. And what the problem was is when you slew large distances, it was very accurate. When you slew short distances below 1 degree, so if you slew from one star to the next and it's within 1 degree,
yeah,
it would be accurate. But between the distance of 1 to 3 degrees in either axis, it would miss it by a half a degree to a degree. It would overshoot it.
I see.
So if it tried to slew 2 degrees, it would go 3 degrees. If it tried to slew 1.5, it would go 2.5. So it was really vexing problem, and fortunately, I've got Wes McDonald to help me discuss things. And one Saturday, we spent about 6 hours iterating on different ways the firmware could cause this to happen, and we narrowed down the issue to the way I was configuring the step rate and the microstep rate when you slew. It's like the microstepping is kind of like a gear shift, okay? When you want to go slower, you go into low gear. You go to microstepping, more microsteps per step. And then when you want to go further, you go to a higher gear, and the step is like 4 microsteps per step. instead of 8 or 16. So you change gears basically, and that's where the issue was. When we were going these intermediate distances, I calculated intermediate rate to get there, and then that rate was not being calculated correctly, and it overshot. So that's kind of a detailed explanation of what was going on. But suffice it to say, it was a problem in the firmware, and we finally figured it out after a few hours of work and testing, and we got it done. So I thank Bill Black for discovering that. I think it was Bill that discovered that issue.
Right. Wade, he has a question. He says, "What's the future plan for PMC-Eight? Is there any plans to move it just beyond mount control?"
Well, I've talked to Scott a long time about how, I don't want to say generic, but how multi-purpose this device really is, and how we can, it might in the future, I'd like to take advantage of that. And it's a robotic motion control system is what it is. Yeah. So you could think that it could be used for anything that requires a stepper motor system that's very precisely controlled. It could be used on, like, and I'd like to develop a STEM motion control learning kit that might have some motors and the PMC-Eight, the IXOS 100 board, and then all the documentation and some programming examples, kind of like a hardware development kit for the PMC-Eight would be cool to have. We've talked about that over the years. There's some other expansion, larger systems, maybe branching into a full observatory control system in terms of hardware.
Right.
We could go into that type of stuff.
Yeah, because later this year we'll have observatory domes. So there's a couple of models that we'll have. We are expecting our first dome to arrive sometime in September or October at this point. So it's coming up on it. We're kind of excited, to have that. So I say everybody should have a pair of binoculars if you're an astronomer. Well, I'll say that you also need your own observatory dome.
Right.
So something.
It's just like anything else. When you invest in these systems, once you've been out under the sky with a portable system, you set it up a couple hundred times over the 4-year period, you'll learn to appreciate any kind of thing you can buy that saves you time and effort. And building an observatory is a big part of that.
Yeah. Wade says he'll take 2 domes. No problem.
Twin domes.
That's right. Yeah, just in the chat here, just put in your credit card number, your expiration date, your billing address, and all your private information.
Your CV code for the card.
So anyhow, it's been a fun day today. I got to try some new stuff, a little bit different programming today. Started a little bit early. I got to talk about small telescopes and inexpensive telescopes, which I love to do, because I know what they can do. It is a little sad to me that I think roughly, 20 million small telescopes sell every year, and really only a small segment of those people become amateur astronomers. What I don't know is how many people who look through a telescope and even just saw the moon through it or Saturn's rings through it, what did that inspiration do for them? How did it help them in their lives? I really do believe it actually improves people's lives overall. It sets a basis for people to be inquisitive and to use, to think the deep thoughts, and I think it really does help them in school and life and to regain perspective when things are challenging. So anyhow, I think that's our show today. As I mentioned, Virtual Star Party 4 is coming up next Tuesday. We would like to have more people join in, you can get a free ticket at explorescientific.com/events. I put in a link to go there. You'll get instructions on how to be part of this. Kelly Beatty will be on with us from Sky and Telescope Magazine, and as well as David Levy. So, and our astronomers from around the world, and you can be one of them. So, thanks very much for listening, and I'm going to leave you today with some music from Fiorella Terenzi. She's an astrophysicist, pop star, and this is a 1990s music video that they did called Quantum Mechanic. And so if you're into that 90s sound, man, and Thomas Dolby, you're going to love this.
you